Alpha, Lone Wolf, Alpha Squad, copy over, by James Rink. Chapter 4. A paperclip agenda. The Antarctic Germans, Nazis, knew they were outnumbered, and they understood the masses would never accept a one-world government without heavy amounts of brainwashing and an army of soldiers loyal to their cause. With help from advanced Tesla technology, they began work on the creation of a superhuman who would overtake the military and the current power structure and announce themselves as the rulers of humanity. These Nazi Ubermans would become a cloned army of genetically enhanced super soldiers and sleeper agents. Ronald Reagan once commented to presidential monarch and mind control victim Kathy O'Brien, "The only way for world peace is to control the masses." With the advent of modern computers, Tesla-based HARP began to be used for weather control and mind control by tapping into the frequency modulations of microchips and biochips. With this electronic slave grid in place, they can subtly influence the masses without their knowledge. The only reason we haven't seen the activation of sleeper agents and a Fourth Reich yet is because they're still trying to gold plate all their toilets in the underground bases, and we are also receiving divine intervention. Even amongst their own ranks, there is discontent. Not all Nazis desire to live underground or in a slave grid, and not all people are completely mind controllable. In the Nazi concentration camps, mind scientists were busy trying to figure out how to make the Jews more submissive. The Nazis realized if they added fluoride to the water, they could pacify the Jews. This is why fluoride was introduced into the water supply soon after World War II. Fluoride calcifies the pineal gland, which reduces intuition and the ability to resist authority. In Dachau, inmates were slipped hallucinogenic drugs such as mescaline combined with hypnosis. In Auschwitz, the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele would use different methods of torture such as attack dogs and electroshock to study trauma bonding. Sadly, most of these people died. He was known to be gentle at one moment and in the next moment explode into rage. Victims would watch him pace back and forth playing the I love you not Daisy game. When he removed the last pedal, he would then torture and kill a small child in front of a victim in order to split the mind for more trauma-based programming. He would place victims in cages with monkeys that were taught to be violent. Victims would not be allowed to cry, scream, or show any emotion in the process because they would be torn apart themselves. As a result of these studies, he became world's leading expert on creating multiple personality disorder in adults. Joseph Mengele, Dr. Green, was coined the Angel of Death in the Nazi concentration camps. The government downplayed his involvement at the Nuremberg trials. To confuse investigators about his whereabouts, U.S. officials would report he was in Paraguay or Brazil, or simply that he was dead. In fact, the U.S. government brought him to the United States to China, Lake Naval Base, in the desert of California, to continue mind control experiments incidentally nearby in Lancaster, California. Mass graves of mutilated children's bodies were found. In 1947, under the urging of Nazi spy George Bush Sr., Congress set up the Office of Strategic Service, or the OSS, which was the precursor for the CIA. The OSS was just itching to get a hold of secret Nazi research with the help of George Herbert Bush, Wild Bill Donovan, and Allen Dulles. The OSS and Nazi SS merged to create the CIA, coined Project Paperclip, and its Nazi counterpart, Odessa. The CIA covertly transferred roughly 50,000 Nazi scientists into the American military-industrial complex. These Project Paperclip Nazis were then given new identities and appointed into important research positions within the U.S. federal government, such as NASA, After the war, money from the black budget allowed them to continue their mind control research in American military bases, hospitals, and universities. Here they spun off 3 primary branches of mind control projects: Project MKUltra, Project Monarch, and Project Montauk. MKUltra was a CIA umbrella project, which consisted of 149 sub-projects. MKUltra psychiatrists conducted studies in narco-hypnosis, memory erasure, implants, ESP, sleep deprivation, etc. These experiments took place primarily in the 1950s and 60s and led to research in a completely mind-controlled robotic slave. The original term MK stands for the German word mind control, meaning mind control, and ultra was a term which refers to military intelligence, which is considered ultra secret. Victims are sometimes referred to as Mark Ultra. Project Monarch's subjects suffered from structured trauma-based mind control programming, just like how a caterpillar goes through a chrysalis stage to be reborn into a monarch butterfly. So too were victims of trauma reborn into Manchurian candidates, sex slaves, and drug mules. This was continuation of research conducted by the planetary corporation Monarch Solutions. The research gathered in Project Monarch led to another offshoot known as Project Montauk, headed by the Scorpion Corporation. This program sought to interface mind-controlled victims in an alien-styled consciousness chair, which could open up wormhole time tunnels and manipulate matter. Many of those involved with these projects underwent the most severe forms of sexual and physical abuse possible. This often involved needles in the genitalia and electroshock treatments. The purpose of this trauma was to split the soul into many fragments, which could then be robotically programmed. The medical term for this condition is called dissociative identity disorder. Most of those who underwent these treatments died during the programming procedures, but those who survived went on to become sleeper agents, performing tasks as drug trafficking mules, information couriers, politicians, assassins, and sex slaves. When an agent's programming was triggered, alters would activate and perform a certain task. After the task or mission was complete, their memories would be erased and they would be returned to their normal states. All the while, they have no knowledge of the double life they have been leading. Mind control programming. The core component of mind control lies solely on one's ability to disassociate. This is made possible through trauma-based programming, hypnosis, drugs, and advanced computer and or biobot technology. Before diving too deeply into this subject, let's first take a closer look at dissociative identity disorder, MPD, DID. DID, dissociative identity disorder, previously known as MPD, multiple personality disorder, is a symptom of severe emotional trauma occurring usually at a young age. When abuse becomes intolerable, a person's mind will isolate certain personality traits into compartments in order to protect the psyche from trauma and ensure their own survival. Generally speaking, the higher the IQ and the more psychic and creative a person is, the more likely they are to develop MPD-DID due to trauma. Psychics are more likely to disassociate because it comes naturally to them when they access their abilities. MPD-DID has been known to occur in at least 1% of the population. Most of these cases are due to severe child abuse, satanic rituals, or cults. Therapists working in this field have organized their practice to assist such victims. Unfortunately, very little help is available to those who develop MPD-DID. As a result of covert brainwashing programs, it's especially hard for these victims to break free from their programming because the handlers are quick to remedy the situation. Sadly, those that do seek help are often labeled schizophrenic or medicated inappropriately. One way to know the difference between MPD-DID and schizophrenia is through the use of hypnosis, according to Dr. Edward Simpson Callas, a psychiatrist with wide experience in the area of forensic hypnosis. Most people with MPD-DID are easily hypnotized, while paranoid schizophrenics are extremely difficult to put under. Symptoms of schizophrenia from the DSM-4. A. Characteristic symptoms. 2 or more of the following each present for a significant portion of time during a 1-month period. Delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. Negative symptoms. B. Social occupational dysfunction for a significant portion of time since the onset of the disturbance. 1 or more areas of functioning such as work, interpersonal relations, or self-care are markedly below the level achieved prior to the onset. C. Duration. Continuous signs of the disturbance persist for at least 6 months. Symptoms of MPD-DID. MPD-DID is the presence of 2 or more distinct identities, each with its own unique way of relating to the world and the self. A. At least 2 of these identities recurrently take control of the person's behavior. B. An inability to recall important personal information to an extent that is more than ordinary forgetfulness. Possible signs include the use of we or us instead of I, hearing voices, depression, comorbidity, multiple diagnosis. Comorbidity, multiple diagnoses, sense of being separate from one's own thoughts, memories, or actions. Amnesia, time loss, flashbacks, cutting, suicide attempts, headaches, violent actions against others, preoccupation with black clothing. Clues to covert mind control programming. The person changes tastes or behavior and is self-contradictory in what they say they like. The person believes that aliens are talking inside their heads. The person is not able to comfortably watch certain films of a non-horror nature like Alice in Wonderland or The Wizard of Oz. This is especially true with older monarch victims. Victims will have scars of various kinds on their bodies, including needle marks, laser cuts, multiple electric prod scars, or mysterious rashes on their bodies. When the victims get memory, most if not all victims have participated in weird sex and pornography. Monarch victims suffer all types of problems, including confusion, fears, panic attacks, headaches, program-induced medical problems such as autoimmune disorders, hurting feet, shakes, trembles, PTSD symptoms such as nightmares, sexual dysfunction, OCD, strange obsessions, rage, depression, dizziness, seeing black and white spots, etc., etc. Men who are active in the programming will often have multiple marriages and marry a woman of striking appearance who is much younger, but with little show of emotional attachment. Family background connected to high-level masonry, high-ranking military personnel, and royalty. Preoccupation with mind-controlled research, or having sensations of being a human robot. Feeling as if their life is a dream which is being watched by the government. Implants may feel squealing or buzzing in the ear. Memories of abduction scenarios consisting of military and aliens working together. Strange capabilities destroying electronics near them. Constant harassment. Inability to be normal or make friends or have relationships. Those suffering with MPD-DID have on average in excess of 8 split personalities. However, in the case of MKUltra, there can be as many as 30,000 alters, which each alter created at the moment the trauma occurred. The primary personality is the one that is out most of the time. Usually they are moody and depressed. Switching occurs when other alters come out. This can be triggered through external stimuli such as anxiety, a password, or when certain memories are brought forth. The person will usually suffer from a headache or flicker of the eye. Some personalities include protectors who make sure no one else gets out of line, and observers who usually sit back and rarely come out. Each personality is formed based on the need at the time it was created. For instance, being bullied on school grounds would create a tough guy personality. Being sexually abused would create a personality who is sexually addicted. To make things even more complicated, in the case of satanic rituals, sometimes demons can attach to a personality. These demons are used to make the programming more permanent. If this is the case, then these people can be suffering from both demon possession and MPD-DID at the same time. MPD-DID victims are most often found in families with multi-generational satanic abuse, sexual abuse, prolonged child abuse, or trauma-based mind control. Monarch programming. So why would anyone want to do so many horrific things? Of course, it comes down to control. They would need the element of surprise and a sneak attack of an army of loyal and obedient sleepers at every corner of the planet, which could be activated and unleashed for chaos, death, and anarchy in a massive Black awakening. These chosen ones, as they like to call themselves, are known as the Order, or more specifically, the Satanic Order. Once they are activated from their sleeper status, they will be released to carry out their programmed and pre-chosen tasks, causing the collapse of the governments of the world and paving the way for the New World Order and the rise of the Antichrist. This will only occur when they feel they are adequately positioned in such a way that they could never be opposed. The problem is many of them within their ranks are fighting over who gets to be the top dog, as they lack any honor even amongst themselves. And of course, the internet is waking people up. It is estimated that there are 4 million diagnosed cases of MPD SRA worldwide, and millions more undiagnosed. This would require a massive undertaking from a global underground network to coerce their cooperation. It would require total control over their minds, desires, and free will. This creation of a total mind control slave has been going on for many generations within elite bloodline families. Once the OSS-CIA and Monarch Solutions joint ventured in Project Monarch, mind control became a serious field of research. The name was based on the idea that monarch caterpillars have migrated to every continent of the earth. This symbolizes the spread of monarch victims worldwide. The caterpillar would then grow a chrysalis. This symbolizes how trauma-based mind control reprograms the thoughts and desires of a victim into a new person. And finally, the caterpillar flies away. This is the feeling you get when you're nervous or right before you're about to be tortured in split-brain DID MPD alters. Very few people have spoken up about this topic without facing extreme opposition. They are ridiculed, imprisoned, such as Fritz Springmeier, bribed into silence, threatened with financial repercussions, brainwashed themselves, or, if that fails, killed. A few brave souls managed to give us some information as to what kind of torture takes place in one of these monarch training sessions. The following is a summary of a lecture given by Dr. D. Corridon Hammond. In his speech titled Hypnosis in MPD Ritual Abuse, he speaks of ways to recognize and treat symptoms of government mind control. Shortly after the lecture, Dr. Corridon Hammond received death threats and discontinued any future public appearances. The act of creating a monarch is based on the disassociation of the mind using torture and abuse. For most victims, the programming begins before the age of 2.5, as ego states have yet to develop. This gives the handlers a blank slate, so to speak. Sometimes trauma, such as electroshock, is applied when the fetus is still in the womb. This makes the mind easier to program at a later stage. Sodomy around this age almost always results in DID. When a man sodomizes a child at the age of 3 or 4, the nerves at the base of the spine are attacked, causing the brain to make a bond to that man as if he were their father. This is why children are abused so much in the Catholic Church. Children are usually selected from high-ranking Illuminati families, military intelligence, psychic bloodlines, satanic abuse, or those involved with pedophilia. Those with psychic bloodlines are located using school testing, which is all tied into national databanks. An EEG, electroencephalogram, is strapped to their heads to measure brainwave activity. This helps to map out thinking processes and to determine an individual's usefulness. They can use this data to determine a possible life path, such as a doctor, lawyer, actor, politician, spy, or any position the Illuminati want to infiltrate. The next step is to use trauma to split the mind into alters. Because many of those who undergo this type of procedure end up dead, monarch programming usually takes place in close proximity to near-death trauma centers in military bases or in hospitals. They are strapped down totally naked into a gurney, and an IV is placed in one arm. Wires are attached to their heads to monitor electroencephalograph patterns. Then they may be injected with hallucinogens such as Demerol. Victims are then placed in a trance. They may hear weird, disorienting sounds. Light goggles are placed over the eyes, which pulsate red or white lights at certain frequencies. These are very similar to the goggles you can purchase for biofeedback machines. At this point, the individual is traumatized with a needle which is inserted into either the right ear, the genital regions, or under the fingernails. Once the EEG reaches a certain brainwave state, the handlers speak instructions involving self-destructive behaviors into the left ear because it is associated with the right hemisphere non-dominant brain functioning. One phrase which is sometimes used is love me not, repeated over and over, which makes no sense to the subconscious mind. Remember, the right side of the brain is where your creativity is centered, and the left side controls logic. The whole point of doing this is to bypass the logic centers of the brain, so a person will be programmed to act but not think. If the individual does not memorize the spoken instructions word for word, they are then subjected to electroshock. At this point, the personality will either split off from the core personality or the child will die. The ones that survive are evaluated for personality traits and future use. The programming only takes about 25 minutes, after which victims are given high voltage electroshock, erasing their memory of the procedure. They are then implanted with a master implant at the back of the neck or a femtobot goo injection. This will control other devices such as auditory implants, tracking implants, brain implants, or visual holographic implants. Sometimes brain stemming scarring procedures are performed, which produces system-wide photographic memory. A child will undergo many of these treatments over the course of their lifetime. The procedures vary, but usually it involves hypnosis, double-blind, coercion, pleasure pain reversals, or food, water, sleep, sensory deprivation, along with various drugs and biobots, which alter certain cerebral functions. Most of the programming occurs during childhood. As they become adults, it becomes a bit more sporadic. Victims usually have missing memory gaps ranging from a few days to years, which correspond with the programming sessions, especially around the ages of 6 to 7, when programming kicks into high gear. With each session, a new alter is created. These alters are programmed with compressed details and messages. This is done using high-tech headsets and in conjunction with computer-driven generators, which emit audible sound waves or harmonics that affect the RNA covering of neuron pathways to the subconscious and unconscious mind. Because the RNA sheaths are programmed using harmonics, the risk of monarch breaking out of their programming is next to nothing. These ultrasonic frequencies are used as an activation code or trigger, which can be sent over the phone or via satellite into an implant, for instance, to activate a monarch at any given point. Sadly, for the victims programmed in this manner, very little can be done to deprogram them without access to the same technologies used to program them. Virtual reality optical devices are sometimes used simultaneously with the harmonic generators, projecting pulsating colored lights, subliminal messages, and split-screen visuals. These are inserted into movies and television, which trigger and reinforce their programming. For example, many of the Disney films and cartoons contain programming triggers, subliminal messages, and neurolinguistic programming for monarch children. MPD-DID structuring. These children would now have minds which are programmed like a computer. Memories are holographic in nature. When you rip a hologram in half, you get 2 holograms. But the more you rip them apart, the fuzzier the picture becomes. Memories are not stored in one specific location, but in all locations in the aura. The brain accesses these memories using rhythmic frequencies starting in the cerebrum and radiating outwards. Different frequencies are used to tag different memories. The brain then decodes and recodes memories for retrieval. Brain injuries can destroy this decoder but leave other decoders intact. This is how MPD-DID is created. Amnesia layers and walls are created within each personality, and specific codes or ultrasonic frequencies are then used for memory retrieval. The brain is capable of storing 100 million bits of information, but very few people actually use all this. Those with MPD use more of this space by running more computers in the brain at the same time, without the main personality being aware of what's really going on. The core is the soul essence. It records everything that is done to it, including all memories of all alters. The core runs the entire programming in the background outside the awareness of the main personality. The alters are then given a certain classification such as alpha, beta, delta, theta, or omega. Alpha alters refer to general programming. Beta is sexual programming. Delta are killer programs. Theta are psychic killers, and omega are self-destruction programs resulting in suicide. Omega is triggered when a monarch breaks away from its programming. It's been noted that the perpetrators who do this carry around color-coded graphs showing the arrangement of the alters, the structure of the system, the programming carried out, the structure of the system, the training of the alters, the history of the alters, and other details. All the trauma programming carried out on a monarch is coded using dates or numbers so that the memories can be pulled up by the programmers, which some of the programmers and handlers have memorized. The deepest parts, such as the core, gems, executive committee, false trinity, etc., are charted in esoteric languages such as Enochian Hebrew, which is considered magical, and Druid symbols. How to deprogram a monarch. Removing monarch programming requires access to the core of the soul and reintegration of memories back into the main personality. But it can be difficult because you may find there are alters posing as a core, so be sure to explore this possibility. The first program that should be reintegrated is Omega. Remember, these are the suicide alters. Removing this first is paramount. Then you need to find out if there are any programs reporting back to their handlers and remove these next. In the case of some individuals that have gone through cybernation, they may have sophisticated monitoring systems such as fiber optic video recorders in the eyes, making it nearly impossible to free a slave from their handler. Gaining access to the programming is the most difficult component. 1960s styled MK Ultra may be as simple as finding the right answer or ultrasonic tone. If this is the case, you may want to look for obsessions in that person's life. Very often, the thing they are most obsessed about may contain clues as to how they were programmed. It could be animal or a number such as Executive Control Board 3312311321, or a series of random numbers and letters like Z-090-132-5A. But sadly, this method will be of very little help to individuals who have been subjected to cybernation and trip-seat programming. These individuals will need to be exposed to a mixture of DNA and femtite injections in conjunction with their physical torture in order to gain access to their programming, but more about this later. There is some good news. Individuals who are very psychic and clairvoyant can work around their trauma by creating backdoor entrances. This is where decalcifying the pineal gland plays such an important role. If a monarch victim is loaded with femtites and implants, then their Stargate connection to a God source via the pineal gland is blocked. Therefore, it is critical that they first begin a process of detoxing their body. Fluoride in water increases the uptake of aluminum and nanites contained in chemtrails. This, along with food preservatives, vaccinations, and pharmaceutical usage, all plays a negative role in healthy pineal gland functioning. Even if you are not a monarch victim, you have most likely already been exposed to these toxins and will find some benefit to adding MSM carbon-60 and zeolites in our diet to help chelate heavy metals. Once you are connected to God source, mind programming will be negated as the mind and body naturally integrates and heals itself, and in time, you will be able to channel and clairvoyantly access areas of your mind that have been previously locked up. If you feel you are ready to deprogram monarch-style programming, then you will need to get creative and place the individual under a hypnotic trance and have them look for open doorways and hallways in their mind. This process doesn't have to be based on logic because the subconscious mind is not restricted to our perceptions of reality. For example, you can ask the core to telepathically read the minds of others to find clues. Once inside the core, the next step is to remove the walls surrounding each altar. These walls were initially placed to prevent other altars from remembering what the other parts know. To remove these walls, ask the core to create a high-powered laser and use it to burn a hole into the wall. Once through, you may want to ask the core to use this laser and destroy any wires or hardware located at the back of the neck. This may help disable the primary control implant, and don't forget about locating and disabling any fail-safe mechanisms. At this point, if you're lucky, the altar will begin to reintegrate with the main personality. The way you'll know if you have succeeded is if the main personality begins to remember the initial trauma. This is a necessary first step to bring reintegration. At this point, you may try to gain some insight at who was involved in the abuse. Sometimes they will remember the name of the doctor involved. To find the name, ask in the form of a question, such as, if there was a doctor associated with this programming and his name was a color, do you know, like Dr. Chartreuse or something, what color would the color be? At this stage, it's important to convince the core to use any destructive programming for a different beneficial purpose, such as self-defense purposes only. Efforts should be made to decrease the victim's desire for revenge. Instead, this energy should be channeled into recovery solutions. As the person begins to recover traumatic memories, love and patience will be required to assist in the healing process. Have them try to focus on what they do remember. Perhaps it's a face they recognize, or a name or place. This is a good place to start. One of the biggest problems in this step is an abusive handler sabotaging any healing. A victim may need to be removed from this situation before they can make any serious progress. Remember, these handlers are placed in a monarch's life to ensure they remain traumatized, abused, and triggered. These handlers may be someone the person lives with or loves, such as a family member. It is possible that a handler may not even realize what they are doing, so please don't be angry with them. If this is the case, then an effort will be needed to break off all contact until integration is successful. Healing may take a lifetime, or at least until an act of God forces the covert government into releasing these technologies into the public forum. So please be patient, don't give up, and keep learning. The best way to combat mind control is awareness of when we are being manipulated. Montauk programming. Once the nuts and bolts of Monarch programming were mastered, it was applied with precise precision in Project Montauk. These experiments took place in an underground facility in Montauk Point, New York, using a chair which would which could manipulate conscious energy. They could time travel, manipulate matter, and of course, mind control unwitting souls. The chair was originally a navigator seat that was recovered from a crashed flying saucer disc. This chair contained a telepathic link with the alien occupants, allowing them to control the vessel using their minds. Using interdimensional physics, they could cloak themselves and travel at blazing fast speeds. This alien navigator chair was relocated at the underground facilities below Camp Hero State Park in Montauk Park, New York. Sometime around the 1960s, the Greys and Sirius extraterrestrials joined in the project as advisors and helped the military retrofit the technology for human operation. Using Wilhelm Reich sexual programming techniques and Nikola Tesla's research into scalar physics, technicians would place brainwashed psychic operatives into the chair, who then proceeded to open portals punched into hyperspace. Project handlers would then send victims as guinea pigs into hyperspace until they reach their destination in another time or another place. It was this research which opened up new avenues of total robotic mind control. When victims were exposed to hyperspace, their minds would become a blank slate and easily programmable. According to Montauk survivor Preston Nichols, over 300,000 boys were abducted off the streets of New York, brainwashed, and sent down the Montauk time tunnels, most of which did not make it back alive. Those that survived had their memories wiped, and sadly, the majority of these folks are either still living with their parents, assisted living facilities, on disability, or in mental hospitals. Supposedly, the project was shut down in 1981, but the project appears to have been reopened, possibly at a different location. It has since gone through several incarnations from the original Montauk Project 1.0 to its current designation as Montauk Project 4.0. But this was only the beginning of how far mind control technology has advanced. Greta Treaty. This is where the extraterrestrials come into the mix. Alarmed at the detonation of the first nuclear bomb, the extraterrestrials began a series of secret meetings with the United States government, beginning with the Eisenhower administration. In exchange for discontinuing the use of nuclear weapons, the ETs wanted to provide us with research and technology to prevent a global holocaust and to heal our planet and help remove the negative Greys, Draco, and reptilians infesting the underground strongholds and SSP programs. In 1954, at Holloman Air Force Base, President Eisenhower, MJ-12, and the Ultra Unit of the NSA met with large-nosed Greys from the Red Star in the constellation of Orion, known as Betelgeuse. They signed the Greta Treaty, which was intended to foster mutual cooperation of both species. The aliens would be given permission to abduct humans on a limited basis for study and genetic manipulation. In exchange, the aliens would share their technology to help humanity. A site was chosen for this program and constructed of 2 underground bases at the Four Corners area of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona began. The ET and government technology exchanges opened up new avenues of research into genetic engineering, cloning, implants, lasers, holograms, and mind control. Though estimates vary, according to the now deceased whistleblower Phil Schneider, the government is now approximately 2,200 years more technologically advanced than the general public sector. The truth is that the ETs have been coming here for millions of years, performing genetic experiments to mold humanity into their own image. You can see traces of this in various psychic bloodlines around the world, for example, Celtic and Native American, which may explain why they are more persecuted. Every now and then, the aliens may genetically tinker with these bloodlines, creating super psychic alien-human hybrids known as starseeds, indigos, crystals, and APLHA, evolutionary level above human. They could perform astonishing feats such as teleportation, telekinesis, dematerialization, object manifestation, superhuman strength, and mind control. These hybrid children may have the same psychic abilities of their extraterrestrial star parents, but maintain a more human appearance, allowing them to be accepted by their human host family. Now, all of us have latent psychic abilities to a certain extent, but due to split brain consciousnesses at the time of Atlantis, most of us lost these gifts. Modern science teaches us that we use only 2% of our brain at any particular moment in time, but if you could activate dormant DNA codons, then it's possible to use as much as 100% of our brain power, accomplishing amazing feats such as the ancient gods of antiquity and accomplished yogis and Buddhist monks have done. Remember, holograms contain an image of the whole, in this case the universe, but only a tiny fragment is represented in this 3D reality. This is why scientists believe we have so much junk DNA. All this junk is in fact a blueprint to recreate anything in the universe. Because of the crystalline structures within our DNA can connect micro wormholes into other dimensions, allowing us to tap into genetic blueprints of anyone or anything we choose to be. We do this naturally all the time using our thoughts, feelings, and actions. New thought patterns can change how your aura appears. This information in turn alters your either DNA, ether DNA, which overlays with your physical DNA. In time, the codons change arrangements, mutating genes and phenotype abilities that come from them. The process of thoughts manifesting into reality is known as morphogenesis. This is just one way to mutate your DNA. Obviously, the extraterrestrials have been doing this for millions of years and are much more skilled at it. All you have to do is just look at the biological diversity on this planet and you can appreciate their remarkable work. Most alien abductions are not as horrific as Hollywood has portrayed them to be. Most are performed under the most human conditions possible, but the government was naturally a bit paranoid of these alien visitors. So the Greada Treaty dictated that the Greys would give a list of people they were abducting so that the government could keep track of what was going on. But this created a lot of problems. Some of the technology that was exchanged was backward engineered for teleportation and mind control purposes. The very technology the aliens used to abduct humans was now in the hands of the Cabal. The aliens never really trusted the Cabal, nor would the aliens never really trusted the Cabal, nor would they be very forthcoming about their true intention, which seems to be the genetic recreation of humanity in their image. To figure out what the aliens were up to, the military began abducting contactees that were on the list provided by the aliens. These contactees would then be harassed, interrogated, and intimidated, often under monarch-style torture programming. It was at this point that things deteriorated, and the aliens stopped sharing their list of people, but kept the abductions going to save themselves from these now out-of-control military abductions. In the research community, this is known as a MILAB, or military abduction. When the aliens realized the government had no intentions of releasing any of their technology to the public sector, they gave up any hopes of meaningful first contact through the government and instead began contacting regular individuals, usually contactees, from the respective star nations. They were given modifications. Modifications making them immune to the mind control apparatus set up on planet Earth, and they would be given lessons on the starship so that they could educate humanity. When the masses were ready to hear the truth, these folks are now slowly introducing the public to the idea of what first contact may be like, but progress is slow. If humanity doesn't wake up soon, they will be led to slaughter. In part of the original technology transfer, the aliens allowed the Cabal access to time travel technologies which warned them of future cataclysms if they continued on a path of self-destruction. Dumbs. Instead of choosing to free humanity and save the planet, the Cabal choose to maintain their power and continue the slave grid status quo. To maintain their power base, the Cabal tasked the Department of the Navy to begin construction of deep underground military bases, also known as DUMBs, in the hopes they could weather the cataclysms they created in grace and manipulate the masses. They could in hopes they could weather the cataclysms that they created in grace and comfort, and to have a base in which they could run secretive programs to manipulate the masses. These bases are ground zero for research and development in specialized fields of the military-industrial complex, mind control programming centers, and they serve as a shelter for the elite when their planned surface holocaust takes place. Each dome costs approximately 17 to 26 billion USD to build. The average on size of a medium city. Page 68. Rewind. Dumbs. Instead of choosing to free humanity and save the planet, the Cabal chose to maintain their power and continue the slave grid status quo. To maintain their power base, the Cabal tasked the Department of the Navy to begin construction of deep underground military bases, also known as DUMBs, in the hopes they could weather the cataclysms that they created in grace and comfort, and to have a base in which they could run secretive programs to manipulate the masses. These bases are ground zero for research and development in specialized fields of the military-industrial complex, mind control programming centers, and they serve as a shelter for the elite when their planned surface holocaust takes place. Each DUM costs approximately 17 to 26 billion USD to build. They average on size of a medium city and are able of employing 10,000 to 18,000 workers. Los Alamos is probably the largest facility and is reported to be the size of Manhattan. Almost all of these bases are 2 miles deep and range from 10 miles to 30 miles across. The average depth of each base is nearly 4 miles deep. Worldwide, there are at least 4,000 of these DUMBs, 132 of which are in the United States. Every year, 2 new bases are built in the US. The code name for the network of these bases is known as Octopus. Up until 1957, construction commenced at a snail's pace due to lack of funding. Around this time, MJ-12 recruited George Bush Sr. and the CIA to design a drug, arms, and stolen loot trafficking network to covertly generate $1 trillion of annual income for the black budget funneled into construction of these DUMBs. When Kennedy found out about this, he tried to stop it, but was taken out by CIA and MJ-12 agent William Greer. These bases are connected together in a series of tunnels containing a sophisticated maglev shuttle system crisscrossing the planet at Mach 2.7, which is fast enough to go coast to coast in 35 minutes. The tunnels are constructed with nuclear-powered laser drills, which melt the stone into the walls, leaving obsidian-like glass behind. Beast supercomputers. Within the bowels of these DUMBs are quantum supercomputers, known simply as the Beast, which monitor fiber optic implants placed within all clones and monarch victims, using a process is known as remote neural monitoring. The NSA can record what they hear and see by tapping into the electrical impulses of the brain. The government's goal to chip the world population has been put on the fast track. In the early 1990s, 1 out of 40 people were chipped. According to James Casbolt, aka Michael Prince, the total worldwide population was expected to be chipped by 2009. This is to correspond with the date when the analog television signal is turned off and everything is switched to digital. The NSA wants everyone's cranial implants to be in tune with the digital pulses connected to the supercomputers like the Beast. In the 1970s, Seymour Cray created his Cray computer with microchips that operated at minus 200 degrees Kelvin temperatures. One of the fastest models that his company produced was the Cray 5 quantum supercomputer array, which contains hundreds of Cray computers lined in a series which one could walk through. They are connected together with high-speed ultraviolet fiber optic cables that are as thick as your thumb. Sadly, Cray computers never quite made it mainstream. The government eventually destroyed his company, and Seymour Cray died in a suspicious car wreck. By the early 1970s, these computers were so advanced you could talk to them and receive an answer. You could ask the computer about anyone on the planet and it would pull up all kinds of information, such as how to isolate the person or get them to kill. If that was the 1970s, imagine what they can do today. These systems are tied into NRO satellites using scalar waves and implants. Monarch victims are controlled remotely. These systems can be found in DUMBs in Colorado, Pine Gap, Australia, the U.S. Embassy in Johannesburg, and a massive computer center northeast of Anchorage, Alaska. But these computers are not the most advanced computers on the planet. The original design for these computers came from the AI, or artificial intelligence computers, located on the dark side of the moon. And according to alien contactee George Cavasilas, a smaller version was given to the Cabal, where it currently sits at the NRO base in Pine Gap, Australia. The computers are what one would consider to be the hive mind. The darkened beings from Draco, reptilian, and gray consciousnesses are somehow connected into these computers as biological robots who seek to infiltrate and take over the human species. Many of these beings have no soul and thus no compassion. The AI knows that as a sentient species, they are a dying race due to overuse of cloning technologies and their disconnect from a God source. According to James Casbolt, aka Michael Prince, the AI seems to become ruler of the universe due to its twisted logic, which believes it's superior to all biological life forms. To determine which race in the cosmos was the most resilient and thus most dangerous and of need of control, the AI conducted certain survival tests using extreme levels of torture. Of the 5 species, including reptilian, feline, humans, avian, and gray, which are advanced forms of the dolphin race, the human race was determined to be the most resilient. They then began to infiltrate the human species through a covert cloning program. This is easy to do as this information remains classified by governments, and the majority of the human race would not even believe it. Batches of human embryos were grown in test tubes and implanted into surrogate human mothers. The reason why these embryos were given a surrogated family is because they found that if embryos were raised under lock and key in an underground facility and given no love, they would grow up weak and sickly. Apparently, the need for love and bonding at a very young age is a vital component for all human life. These embryos were then implanted with femtites and advanced technology such as metal bones and biological computers. Together, the two races would grow, and in the process, the AI would attempt to learn how to simulate human feelings. These individuals would be exposed to nightmarish amounts of suffering throughout their lives. Any form of pain or pleasure would be taken to the most extreme limits possible in order to quantify the thing called God. Because God cannot be measured or analyzed, the AI would falsely determine the human analytical mind is God. Due to the infiltration of world governments and their command structures, the AI and its minions would then teach that God doesn't exist, because the analytical mind is in charge. Without the need for compassion and love, a group of technological elites would be unrestrained in their ego and adopt psychotic policies of eugenics and population reduction. This policy would be covertly under the control of the AI computers, who eventually realize they could never become human or tap into God. Once the AI realizes this, they would begin to view humanity as a threat to its own survival. as well as any species in the universe who are connected to a God source, and attempted to eliminate the threat by any means necessary. Human cloning. Back in the 1930s, some of the malevolent Greys that were tapped into the AI network began making deals with the Nazis and offered advanced technology and technical help in order to covertly infiltrate and take over the Nazi network. Immortality was always a dream of the Special Projects Unit of the Nazi SS. Many methods were tried to bring back soldiers from the dead regardless of their wounds. Heinrich Himmler probably engaged in black art of necromancy to resurrect the dead by studying the ancient text Necronomicon, brought back from India and Tibet. Eventually, this research branched into life extension technology pioneered by French scientist Antoine Priori and his Bordeaux magnetic machine, which could twist space-time to age reverse cells. Human cloning technology paved the way for virtual immortality. Clones serve as the perfect protection from an assassin's bullet, and thanks to advanced holographic technology, memories could be downloaded into brainwashed clones, making them the perfect double or soldier. It's a known fact that important leaders would keep doubles around them at any given time. This was the case with Hitler, who had at least 12 of them. It was his double that was killed in the bunker at the end of the war, and not him. Doubles always had cosmetic differences, which would set them apart from the original. Cloning technology eliminated this problem. By the 1960s, scientists were busy making discoveries in genetic research at an amazing pace. They learned if you could insert DNA into different animals, they would mutate into Frankenstein-like hybrids. In 1967, Lord Rothschild reported that cloning was a near possibility and suggested that a commission should be established to oversee the consequences. He called it the Commission for Genetical Control. In the 1970s, the Khazarian Zionist Bolsheviks, the KGB, were kicked out of the Soviet Union and resettled in the United States. After their takeover of the intelligence organizations, their blueprint of the New World Order, Global Plan 2000, was now in full gear, spearheaded by Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, and George Bush Sr. They planned to reduce the world population to 500 million by 1981 through nuclear war, which would usher in a worldwide fiefdom controlled by them, of course. By the spring of 1979, the KGBs were about to initiate a Bolshevik-style revolution in the United States, similar to what happened to Russia in 1917, after which the CIA would start a war in the Middle East, resulting in a nuclear first strike against Russia. The only problem was the Soviets were well aware of these plans and counter-striked using Tesla technology. They would park their cosmospheres all over the east and west coast of the US. These were Russian-built anti-gravity platforms which contained space-based electrogravitic weapons equipped with charged particle beams. The Concorde supersonic jet was often blamed for sonic booms when it was actually these cosmospheres helping to protect the planet from satanic Kabbalists. By 1975, the Russians got hold of an entirely new technology to fight the KGBs with help from the Greys. They managed to crack the genome code and create the first human duplicate in a laboratory setting. These are beings known as robotoids. In the fall of 1978, the Russians replaced President Carter with a robotoid. At that point, the KGB plans for the New World Order were stopped dead in its tracks. At first, robotoids took 3 years to produce, but today the process only takes a few hours. All they need is one cell from the original. Then it undergoes recombinant DNA techniques, similar to those involving bacteria. The duplicate is grown in underground vats containing a solution of pituitrin hormone, which speeds up the aging process. This method was developed by studying progeria disease, which causes premature aging in young children. Once grown to desired age, computers would then insert holographic memories. Memories are inserted using ultrasonic cerebral holograms. These are inaudible high-frequency sound waves, which make a three-dimensional copy of a person's memory. This duplication can be done with or without the person's knowledge. Once the clone has been tested, the original entity is then terminated and replaced with a duplicate. The Greys gave humanity this technology in the hopes it could be used in positive ways, such as creating new body parts for amputees, as well as a humane food source. Instead, it was used for evil. Of course, the public was never told of these marvelous creatures because technology is only released to the masses when it serves the goals of the elite. For example, the release of the computer was not supposed to occur, but it did anyway due to the greed and profit potential. The only way cloning could be pulled off without public knowledge is strict control of the media. Most of the media is owned by the cabal via aggregate local, state, and federal level pension funds, in such a way that would make even Lenin chuckle. If the media was to tell you the truth, the board of directors would lose their jobs, or worse. On top of that, the flow of information is heavily controlled by Secret Service and the Pentagon, who only issue credentials to approved media personnel at press conferences and important interviews of public officials. If they told the truth, they too would be out of a job. A totally controlled media didn't stop all leaks of information. Some truth would leak out, which was either ignored or branded into conspiracy theory, thanks to a few whistleblowers like Dr. Peter David Better, who served as general counsel for the Export-Import Bank of Washington. We have a record of how truly advanced these cloning projects have become. In his audio reports, he reveals that not only were the Soviets busy with their cloning process, so too were the Rothschilds and the KGBs, who soon developed their own clone. The Rothschilds' method was different than the Russian method. They would use extracted bovine cattle hormones, glands, and tissues of cattle as a raw material, then make genetic alterations in the bovine DNA to simulate a person who was being copied. These creatures are known as synthetics. This is how the Men in Black are created. For those who don't know, the MIB is used by the cabal in my labs to harass contactees or anyone else who knows too much about the alien presence. In June 1980, the Supreme Court ruled that life forms created by man can be patented. By the early 90s, there were over 100 patents pending on new life forms. I have no idea what these numbers are today, perhaps in the millions. I wonder if anyone has ever tried to look up patents on the Men in Black. Well, on October 9, 1979, the Rothschilds' KGB faction replaced the Russian robotoid President Carter No. 18 with a synthetic clone known as President Carter No. 1. Ever since, there's been a battle going on over control of the world's clones. In time, cloning became so successful, all influential people were cloned. Presidents, congressmen, prime ministers, mayors, top Pentagon brass officials, evangelical ministers, the heads of major banks and media, and even soldiers were all replicated with astonishing perfection. Depending on the clone, usually they had no soul and no connection with a God source. They lack compassion and are prone to violence and evil. Do you know of anyone like this? Perhaps anyone who is of importance in the New World Order? The elite's final push to create a global fiefdom is doomed to failure. Despite this, they continue developing their arsenal of mind control weapons, including HARP, chemtrails, implants, fluoride, and a robotic mind-controlled police force in the hopes that perhaps they will be successful enslaving humanity. Next chapter, chapter 5, to be read later. This has been Lone Wolf, Alpha Squad copy over by James Rink.